It's tough being so good looking.
Sorry, Jane. Good evening. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the public hearing to adopt tentative millage and budget meeting this Tuesday, July 31st, 2018. If you wish to speak during the hearing of citizens, please pick up a card in the back of the chambers, print your name and topic clearly, and return the card to our board assistant, Kathy Tompkins. At the appropriate time, I will call you up to speak. Please stand for the flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There will be two segments of public comment, but I don't know if we were separating these. Ultimately, you can speak at any time, but the first opportunity for public comment would be pertaining to the millage rates, and then there'll be a board action item, and then the next item will be on the tentative budget. So again, you can speak at either one, but for clarification, wanted to make that known. The first item is the statement regarding the 2018 proposed millage and 2018-2019 tentative budget. The 2018 proposed millage required local effort millage rate represents a 0.82 decrease over the last year's rolled back millage rate. The total 2018 proposed millage rate represents a 1.63% increase from last year's rolled back millage rate. The operating millage is required to hire staff for the school district, pay negotiated salary and fringe benefits to staff, to cost fuel, electricity, and other goods and services. Moving on to item number 2, it's the public hearing regarding proposed 2018 millage rate. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. When the timer flashes yellow, 1 minute remains, and you need to begin to summarize. You must stop speaking when the buzzer rings. Please note that respect for divergent viewpoints and civility will be shown at every board meeting. Whether you agree or disagree with a speaker, you should listen politely, respectfully, without making any sounds of approval or disapproval. First, I have Corey Tile. Okay, so no problem.
Madam Chair, if I may, you
Please
could just ask if there's anyone who wants to make comment on the millage rates.
Was there anyone who was wishing to speak on the actual millage rates? That's much more efficient, thank you. Seeing none, we can move on to item number 3, adoption of the 2018 proposed millage rates.
I move for adoption of the 2018 proposed millage rate as presented. The recommendations that the following millage rates be adopted as presented: required local effort 3.755 mils, discretionary operating 0.748 mils, capital 1.500 mils, voted operating 1.000 mils, for a total millage of 7.003 mils.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments? I have Mrs. Brown.
Yes, and thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out that the proposed millage rate is rolled back, and it is actually 0.206 less than what it was last year. So if your taxes for schools go up this year, it's because your property value went up. The actual millage rate for the school is going down. This isn't something we decided on. This is what the legislature has told us.
Thank you. And I appreciate that clarification. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, members, please vote on the motion before you. And the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 4 is the public hearing regarding the 2018-2019 tentative budget. And I will keep, unless you want me to reread the rules, we'll move forward, starting with Corey Tile.
Good afternoon, Dr. Bowden and members of the school board. My name is Corey Tile, and I am the ESE liaison at the Imagine School at Palmer Ranch, a nonprofit public charter school in Sarasota County. At a recent school board meeting, Dr. Kingsley presented the data dashboard, and questions and concerns from board members were raised about the lowest quartile. I have always felt strongly about the good work we are doing with our lowest quartile. And after comparing our school to other elementary and middle schools in the district, I found that the Imagine School at Palmer Ranch is at the top, in the top 5 of all elementary and middle schools for our success rate with the lowest quartile. As always, our staff makes me extremely proud. At Imagine, our regular education teachers embrace the tiered modeled approach for instruction, with students fluently moving through tiers as needed. We have a dedicated daily time for intervention called WHEN, or What I Need, where all hands are on deck. On a typical day, you'll see our PE teacher working with middle school math students during his planning time. One of our ESOL paraprofessionals is scheduled to work with 2 students. However, in addition, she has 3 other students who didn't understand this week's story, working with vocabulary and learning strategies. Our speech language pathologist is co-teaching an intensive math class to ensure understanding of conceptual and foundational concepts. The dean of students, after handling a behavior concern, is supporting a language arts student with an assignment. Our school counselor comes to WIN to provide kids assistance in prioritizing missing work and assisting with organization of the agenda and backpack. The list goes on and on and on. It is truly every person at our school understanding what a critical role he or she plays in every student's success. The funding that we receive from capital outlay pays for our educators. It pays for our teachers, the very teachers who support our lowest quartile. Without the funding, we will make difficult staffing decisions that will negatively impact student learning, but specifically our lowest quartile. These dollars are for public school children. They're our kids at Imagine, but you know what? They're your kids. They're Sarasota County school children. They're kids. Please don't turn your back on them. They're children. They need you. You stand in position to vote. Vote the right way. I beg you to reconsider and continue to provide the full capital outlay funding to charter schools so that your students will have the educators they need and deserve, and the school district can continue to reap the benefit of the strong aid that the Imagine School at Palmer Ranch brings year after year. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, I have Alyssa Wright.
Hello, good evening. My name is Elisa Wright, and I'm the incredibly proud principal of this group of people over here. I'm here to really applaud the tradition of excellence in education for all of Sarasota County students and implore you to continue that tradition by restoring funding to the 15% of students that we serve in the charter schools. Historically, I think what has made Sarasota County a leader in parent choice is that you have fearlessly set the bar high for excellence for the students in all of your schools. All of the public schools, charter and traditional, are put on notice annually that our students come first. Delivering anything short of an A grade education is just unacceptable in Sarasota County. To accomplish and maintain status as an A district, Sarasota set the precedent early in the parent choice movement that here in Sarasota, all means all. Equity in education is not just about the services we provide to the students, but the funding that provides those services. Sarasota has long been lauded as a flagship example of placing students above politics by achieving greater equity in funding between public charter and public traditional schools than any other school district in the state. The result, exceptional public schools, both traditional and charter. However, this year, that equity in funding came at risk. The preliminary budget initially showed a decrease in local funding to charter schools. For Imagine School at Palmer Ranch, the amount was excessive, resulting in cuts that included but were not limited to a 3rd grade teacher, a 5th grade teacher, half of a middle school teacher, one of my ESE teachers, a front office staff position, a PE teacher, reduction in hours for my ESOL liaison, and reduction in hours for my school counselor, as well as eliminating planned curriculum purchases in music, art, science, and social studies. Finally, all of our raises were put on hold this year. We're an A school in an A district. However, all means all. Equity in education must not only be about the services provided to students, but it must be about parity in funding those services. For the faculty, families, and students that I proudly serve, I'm asking that you ensure parity in funding for Sarasota County students so that your public charter schools may continue to provide the excellence in education that you require, resulting in A grades, not only for so many of our charter schools, but for the district as well. With 15% of your students attending public charter schools, together we shall rise or together we shall fall. At Imagine Palmer Ranch, we choose to rise, and we hope to continue to do it in partnership with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well timed. Jill, I'm sorry if I butcher anyone's name. Helgeson. I'm sure I didn't say that right. And feel free to correct me.
Good.
Okay.
Good evening, Dr. Bowden and members of the school board. My name is Jill Helgeson, and I'm a very proud teacher at Imagine School at Palmer Ranch. I am here tonight to share a statement from my colleague, Jennifer Carroll, who could not be here. These are Jennifer's words with words with which I agree. In Jennifer's words, I'm a parent who graduated this past year whose child graduated this past year from Imagine School at Palmer Ranch, a nonprofit charter school in Sarasota. I am here today to tell my daughter's story. Having a master's in education, I had concerns about my daughter's learning early on. I was proactive and requested testing. As a result of diagnostics, my daughter was placed into 2 early intervention programs due to an expressive language disability at 4 years old. By 2nd grade, it was decided she would be mainstreamed into our districted school. Within a month, I knew our districted school was not the right fit for her. She was accustomed to a small, nurturing environment. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs for learners, a child must have a sense of belongingness in the classroom. This need was not fulfilled in a traditional school setting. Therefore, I began exploring alternative options. She needed an environment that was more intimate and where she could thrive. She found this at Imagine School at Palmer Ranch. I watched her grow tremendously over the 7 years she spent at ISPR. Her self-esteem was fostered, and I saw her blossom into a confident young lady who believed in herself. She evolved into this type of learner because of the staff at ISPR. They believed in her. She is one of those students our ESE liaison spoke of when discussing the lowest quartile learning gains. I can proudly stand here today and say she finished her middle school experience with a solid 3 in reading and an outstanding 5 in math on FSA, completely bridging all gaps in her learning. The reason for me telling her story is the fact that 15% of our county's population is made up of charter school students. There are other Rachels out there. The staff members at ISPR are the reason why my daughter made those gains, because they wore many different hats to help aid in her success. They were invested. Every single member on this board has pursued his or her position because of a desire to do what is right on behalf of the children of Sarasota County. Please continue to provide capital funding to charter schools so positions will not need to be cut, and students similar to Rachel will be afforded the same opportunity to bridge those academic gaps. Your decision to do this will help meet the needs of all public school children, which ultimately will help keep our district's grade at an A. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next is Candace Woodworth.
Good evening. My name is Candace Woodworth, and I am a proud parent of 3 children that join us here tonight, in which this county serves for their education. After guidance from this school board, we landed our children at Imagine School Palmer Ranch due to their academic challenges and needs that they had. Which you know, ISPR is a nonprofit charter. I've taken pride and honored the long and wonderful relationship this board has had with its charter schools because of the desire and determination to serve the children of this large community. I'm also a recent graduate from the education program at USF Sarasota Manatee and a current master's student. As a student, I worked closely with the school board and the district schools and charter schools such as Imagine, which offered me a broad perspective of the unique nature each type of public school has to offer to their students in which they serve. It is through both lenses, as a parent and as a student, that I've come to appreciate the relationship and integrity this board has maintained with its relationship with the charter schools. However, the recent decision to withhold local capital funds from the families and students, such as my children, because charter is where we found success, is discouraging. As a graduate student, I reflect on my research that is actually being published on the impacts of the academic gap and question how withholding funds will help improve and best serve the children of this community. Some of the faces, like my three, that you see in this audience are the ones that you're saying no to. Children deserve funding and their education. It is with great hope that the board will remember the children this county serves, all the children, despite which form of public school they choose as partners in their success. Please choose to fund all students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Rachel Nez.
Good evening. As a recent graduate from University of South Florida, Sarasota Manatee, and an upcoming first-year teacher at Imagine School at Palmer Ranch, I've had the honor of conducting a case study focusing on the mental health crisis facing our nation and the unique advantage that we have as an educational system to stop the cycle of tragedies that we're seeing in our schools. It's no surprise that guidance counselors provide a crucial educational function that is integral to academic achievement and overall student success. Our school community has seen such positive impacts from services provided by our counselor. From whole class discussions and workshops on character development to individual interventions for students in need, her impacts have been felt campus-wide. While I know Imagine will stand strong in doing whatever it takes to ensure our students receive these important and impactful interventions, I ask you strongly consider the impact these cuts will have on the students in our community. The positive impacts I've highlighted become increasingly more difficult to achieve when funding is cut, making it all the more challenging to close the ever-widening achievement gap. Superintendent Bowden, board members, today I leave you with a quote from Cesar Chavez. We cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about progress and prosperity of our community. Our ambitions must be broad enough to include the aspirations and needs of others, for their sakes and for our own. The relationship that Sarasota County Schools has maintained with public charter schools has been admirable and equitable. Please do not forget about the progress and prosperity of our community and our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Christina Bowman.
Good afternoon, Dr. Bowden and board members. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you about a very important decision that you will be making shortly. I don't believe that there's much that I can add that's been stated prior to my standing before you. But what I can tell you is that I've enjoyed the opportunity for 10 years working in a charter school, working arm in arm, hand in hand with this board, moving forward, making decisions together for this district and to make those decisions for what's best for each child in this district. I can tell you that everywhere I go, Sarasota School District is the model that works together with charter schools. You are the model, and making the decision to move forward, supporting with capital dollars, with the millage dollars, to support the equity as we talked about, but we work hand in hand. That's all we're asking, is to continue working together as a team, supporting one another, and doing what's best for every child, and moving forward and continuing to be a part of this A district. So once again, thank you, and I ask that you consider that moving forward, and we move forward together for every child in this district and every family. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the final completion of hearing of citizens. Mrs. Zucker?
I have a few questions, Dr. Bowden. One of them is, I understand that their capital dollars is used for operating. Is that allowable? Because we can only use our capital for capital except in certain instances. So I'd like to know the clarification.
So the expenditure of capital funds, the rules apply to all public institutions. There is an allowable transfer of capital dollars into the operating fund, but only for allowable expenses. That would not include teachers, guidance counselors, ESE specialists, but it would include operations folks like custodians and maintenance men. But what you frequently find in the budget of charter schools is a transfer that actually happens in the opposite direction, is that capital dollars are allocated for operating dollars are allocated for capital expenditures. And so I was trying to follow the argument that was made today, is that in the absence of these capital dollars, it's not that these capital dollars are paying the salaries of teachers. That would not be an allowable expense of capital dollars. But in the absence of capital dollars, what is likely to happen is that operational dollars are transferred to cover those needs, and those operational dollars would not be allowed to pay the salaries of teachers and guidance counselors. But to answer your question very directly, the expenditure of capital dollars, those rules apply to charter schools in the same way they apply to our school district.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
Okay. Is Imagine School, are they covered under the management company? Do they have to pay money to the management company like the Imagine in Northport does?
I would not be in a position to answer that question for you.
Is there anybody that can answer that question?
I can, yeah.
Do you, was that acceptable?
Yes.
Is that acceptable to the board?
Yes.
Elisa, if you want to come up to the podium so that it can be on the record. Can you state your name also for the record and position?
I'm the principal at Imagine School at Palmer Ranch, and the answer to your question is yes.
Do you have any idea what percent?
Percentage of our total revenues, I believe, I'd have to look exactly, is 8%.
Because I'm just wondering if you're short money because we haven't given you capital dollars, all the capital dollars you need, but on the other hand, you're paying to a management company tax dollars from Sarasota County that goes out of state. So I have a question about that.
Go ahead.
You can't answer it. It's just a philosophy of what's happening, but I want the audience and the community to be aware of this.
Yeah, I do understand that. I think it's akin to the dollars that Sarasota County needs to use at the district level to provide the supports to its school. And I believe our percentage of dollars that we use to get a district level support at our school is much less percentage of our budget than yours.
What has happened to the PICO dollars that you received from the state in the past? Did we ever reduce the capital dollars that we sent you while you had been receiving the capital dollars from the state?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
PICO dollars.
Yes.
You received from the state.
Right.
More than just this last year. Did we ever reduce our funding to you as a result, even though you had funds received from the state? You received funds from the state.
Right.
Okay. Did we reduce our operating funds to you?
Historically,
Capital does?
I do not know the answer to that question.
I don't think we have.
And I'm sorry, this is typically not our step. I just from an analysis standpoint, I don't know if that's perhaps a better question for the board to ask the superintendent how that allocation was. I just don't know if she's prepared for that.
Missy has already answered the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are items that you would like for us to research and have available, we are preparing an agenda item for the 7th to talk about capital dollars and our charter school partners. So if there's these types of questions that are beyond the expertise of district staff, we'll certainly reach out to our charter school partners. So if you have those questions, please send them to us and we'll make sure they're included in our presentation on the 7th.
Thank you. Mrs. Zucker, were you done? Did you have any more questions, statements? Okay.
No, I'm happy that we are going to discuss this because I really don't want to not give the capital dollars, but at the same time, I know that with this restructuring that we're doing with all of our schools, I know that we also need the capital dollars this year too. And you did receive a lump sum. And for the previous years, you've received more. Charter schools have received more in PICO funds than the public schools have. So, I mean, there has to be a discussion about this because it's not fair either way.
Thank you. Mrs. Brown?
Thank you for coming. Part of me says, I could be smug about this and say, welcome to our world. This is what the legislature does to us. We used to be able to levy up to 10 mills for our schools, and then the legislature said, nope, you can only level required local effort, and even your discretionary isn't discretionary. You can only level that much. And a few years ago, probably maybe 10 years by now, where we used to have 2 mills for capital, they reduced it to 1.75 and then 1.5. So we're feeling some of this pain too. And last year, we felt it quite mightily when the legislature required us to share even more than what we shared with you willingly on the point that you could use for operating. And I think several of you were warned, don't expect this on a regular basis, because some of us who understand the funding formulas and all of that knew that, they did this one year, but it hurt some districts more than other districts. And also when you look at the dollar amounts and that it was very unequal as to how the charter schools were paid on a per student basis. I believe it was something like $75 to over $500, $2,000, over $2,000. We were one of the top 5 in the dollars per student that was given, and I know that once that report came out, there were a lot of people that were very jealous of those top 5 counties, and we were one of them that was giving those dollars to the charter schools. And anybody that's watched the funding process in Tallahassee when it comes to school funding, anybody that got below that, those top funds, especially those that were getting $75 per student versus the $2,000, they yelled mightily. And so the legislature said, wait a minute, this isn't fair. You're right, this isn't fair. Plus it was hurting a lot of districts who had obligations that they now couldn't take care of because of the reduced funding that they've had, period, for capital. So what they did is they added up all the money that was received last year through the way that they told us we had to do it on a district basis, and said, okay, here's all the money that the districts gave, and they added that all up, and then they said, here's the money, we will give it to you this year, but they did it on a per student basis on an average of the state. So that dollar, those dollars were given to you without taking away our dollars, which we felt that was a good thing. But you got the average rather than the dollars that came from Sarasota County, which were much more. I think some of you were warned last year not to count on that the following year. Where we're having problems with, and I totally understand some of this, is that, yeah, well, we used to share before the legislature even did that. And now we're not sharing that part either. And I think that a part of that discussion is going to happen on the 7th, where we're going to try to come in somewhere in between, I would hope, because I agree, we've got to look at something. Because the reason why you're having trouble paying your teachers this year and having to cut is because, just like you, we didn't get extra operating dollars this year. The legislature mandated the dollars that they did give us, how we could use them. But on a per student basis, the base student allocation only increased by 47 cents. And in Sarasota County, because they had, I'm sorry, I get into the weeds on this sometimes, the district cost differential was lower, so we actually got less than zero. We got a minus number on a per student basis. What I would like to do with our charter schools is be partners with us when we're looking at going to the legislature. I think we all need to speak with one voice, and we've got to understand one of the most important things they do in Tallahassee is set something called the base student allocation. And when they set that base student allocation, they also set the required local effort, because they take, this is what the base student allocation is, here's the number of students, here's what the total value, property values are for the state, and they divide those two and they come up with that other number. And so when they've cut down our required local effort, they cut down the dollars that we would have received to help pay for those things. So I know you're thinking, because you can easily see where it came out of our end on the capital dollars, that's not helping you. But a lot of your problems are not because of that, but because of the funding that the Tallahassee has done to us and you. We're feeling pains this year too. And I don't know how we're going to resolve it, but it's definitely difficult when the state does not give us additional operating dollars from the year before. It hurts. It hurts you, it hurts us, and you know, it doesn't help too much to be fighting against each other. What we need to do is work together and go together in a single voice to Tallahassee next year, and we don't even have to wait till session starts. I mean, we've got people running for re-election and running for new offices. You teach them the importance of the base student allocation, and you want to make sure that they increase the base student allocation. There's just one question every legislator ought to be able to tell you when session ends. How much did you increase the base student allocation? That's the one question you make sure every legislator is able to tell you when session ends. And if we all do that, we all win. And I hope that on August 7th, we can have some resolution on this. I really do, because it's a double whammy for you all. I understand that. And I'm glad that your teachers can work, and all of yours can work together. I mean, we sometimes have, you know, little towers, or what do you call that we all have to work in. Silos that some of our teachers and some of our other people have to work in, and there is somebody across the hall and across the street that complains when somebody steps out of their silo. But I'm glad you're able to do that, and you've got more flexibility to do that. But, you know, we've had to look at some other things, and I know, you know, capital dollars, when they go to charter schools, it's like, we don't own that building, and when you do something, we don't have it. So the capital dollars to charter schools is a touchy issue. It really is, and we should work together to try to solve it. But by borrowing from Peter to pay Paul isn't going to do it. We need to go to the legislature, and when they've got more funding this year than they had last year, they should have shared it with the school districts, and they should make education first, and we should stand up in one voice and tell them that. And thank you for coming. But please, we'll try to help, but take your message to our legislators too. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson.
So first, I'm going to sound like a broken record. 2 meetings ago, I asked for the 3-year averages. And the last meeting, I didn't get it, and so I asked for the 3 years averages. And so this meeting, I'm asking again. When I was under the impression I was going to get the 3-year averages for this meeting. And was I the only one who didn't get it? Did other people get it? Did none of us get it?
Every time you've asked that question, the answer has been at our next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Yes, you have said that the next
August 7th, you will receive that. So instead of me saying next meeting, let me be clear, it will be on the August 7th agenda, and that has been my answer consistently when asked that question.
Okay, because the 2 meetings ago, you said you actually said the next meeting, but be that as it may, write this down, August 6th. So it will be our next one next time. But will we get it in advance of the next meeting, or will I get it at August 7th on the dais?
I anticipate you'll have that by close of the business on Thursday.
On Thursday, because that's what's really important to me, because I understand where they're coming from. Everybody's looking at discreetly. They got a big their capital dollars went a huge increase last year, and so then they're saying, well, this year's a cut because of I had a big windfall last year, and I don't think that's in my philosophy, I don't think that's the way to look at it. I think we need to look at a more holistic approach, look at a 3-year average, look at what it was like before the legislature got involved, and how it's going to go. And I think what's going to end up happening, until I see the numbers, I'm just telling you how I'm leaning, is, and from Dr. Bowden's comments earlier at the last meeting, was that at 3-year average they're actually ahead of the game. Based upon 3-year average of how much budget they're getting. So maybe in year 4, it'd become time to revisit. But just to reiterate what Ms. Zucker was saying is, there's times where, you guys are getting funding and we're not, and we're not, and we deal with it. I mean, last time, we actually had board members who were looking to go out and borrow money because of what happened last year. That was a point of contention up on the board, like, what are we going to do? We understand exactly where you're at, because that's where we were at last year, and at no time was there any discussion of, let's go to the charter schools and try to get capital dollars from them. That wasn't even an option that anybody talked about. We actually talked about going out and borrowing money and getting a bond in 30 years, and this was in the middle of doing a $25 million safety and security throughout the district, so it was a big capital projects, but at no time did we ever think for a moment, let's see if we can have some sort of clawback or anything like that. That wasn't even discussed, because we understand how much those capital dollars are to you. But if I can I ask Mitzi a few questions, or should I ask directly to you? And what would be easier?
Are we talking about an individual board item at this time, or still responding?
I'm still talking about the budget. My question is, like, on item number on page 8, when we're talking about the 18-19 for the capital, and we're talking about charter school flow-through, and it says $3.6 million. And our amount for the state funding is, what, $900,000? Is that, can we?
Mitch, you want to come to the podium so you're on the public record? It's kind of hard to record a head nod.
And just,
do you see, I'm on page 8.
Under the
estimated revenue.
What tab?
Capital funds. I'm sorry, because that's we're talking about capital.
Right. Just for everyone watching.
For everyone
who has their budget out.
Right. So who does that budget? So
Really tiny number.
Right, really tiny. That's why my glasses. I'm old. So we're talking about capital. So I'm in the capital, and I'm at page 8 on the capital, and I'm looking at estimated revenue, and I'm looking at the second column to the left. I have to look down to my heart to see which one's left and right. Projected budget for 18-19. I think I'm funny.
I laughed.
I'm so funny. And are you with me, Mitzi?
I am, and that is a true.
And I just want to make sure I'm reading that correctly. So that's basically saying that the charter schools in Sarasota County are getting $3.6 million for all the charter schools, and Sarasota County's state funding is roughly $900,000. Am I reading that correctly?
It is. That's correct. The PICO, the actual public education capital outlay funding for the school district, $771,000. So the legislature for 18-19, as far as the distribution of PICO dollars, was $50 million for all public schools in the state, and $145+ million for charter schools in the state. So that would be why there is the differential that you'll see, because that's the direct flow through from the state to charter.
And that's talking about 18-19.
Correct.
And so then if I can draw your attention to page 10 of the capital budget.
Okay.
And I'm going to be looking at the when we're going to be talking about this year, I keep saying this year, last year,
Correct.
17-18, where it's going down to other projects, which is halfway down the page?
Correct.
Okay. Are you with me?
I am.
Okay. So in that, I see that the other projects, the charter schools got $8 million, we'll call it?
Correct.
And for that, we also got around 900,000.
The 7.9 million is the mandated share of the millage.
Right. So the charter schools got, and the charter schools got about 8 million of that
8 million.
in 18-19, and then but under 17-18 again. 17-18.
Just want to stipulate the source of funds for that allocation was not PICO dollars, but the 1.5 capital.
I understand, but I was talking about. A second ago, I was talking about the future budget.
Right.
I'm only talking about this year's budget, just for reference, so you can see how there is a dichotomy between the two. That it's you can't just look at just one discrete number and not take into account PICO dollars, state funding. That's my genesis of just.
Oh, I'm with you.
Yeah. Is my logic sound?
That's true.
Okay.
Last year, they received 1.2 approximately in PICO funding and just shy of 8 million in the capital outlay millage
Okay.
for 17-18.
Right, and so when people are trying to compare 18, one year to the next year, they need to look at totality of how much everybody's getting. To Ms. Zucker's point, not just the state funding, but the 1.5 mil, and how much we're getting, and how much that you guys are getting money from that 1.5 mil. But you're also getting the state money. That was the genesis of what I'm trying to say.
Right, and if you will notice on that same line item, it's zero for 18-19 currently, because you guys have not weighed in on that particular item. But for 19-20 and forward, you'll see that the funding is completely restored because the law was changed for 1 year only.
Right, and the reason why this is zero because it's coming out of our budget, but there's a pass through coming from the state.
Correct.
For the other amount. So I don't want anybody at home just because you just said zero and people aren't playing the flow of conversation. Right. But that's because the state has changed the way it's happening. Correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so to me, taking those things into account, that's why it's important to me to be able to see the multi-year progression. Before I make my decision, I want to see, are you better off, worse off, or the same? And I think from what you had said previously, you're better off if you take into account 16, 17, 17, 18,
and 18.
And 19, 20. Well, year 1, year 2, and year 3. You taking those 3 years in totality and seeing how you're doing, rather than just simply comparing this year from last year. And so that's very important to me. So I hope that we get that and that's used in the decision-making process, because that's going to be used in my decision-making process, and I hope staff uses that when they come back with the recommendation.
You are absolutely correct in that you cannot look solely at one funding source versus the other, but you have to look at them in totality.
And you can't look at just 1 year.
That is correct.
So it's not just one funding source, but you can't look at just 1 year.
Correct.
And I hope that the staff takes those 2 criteria into consideration when you guys come back with a staff recommendation. That's the core of what I'm trying to say.
I will present to you a number of scenarios, one that reflects what you're talking about, one that benchmarks capital funding not on the 3-year average, but goes back to the 16-17 year, which is the year prior to, quite honestly, the state's involvement in capital outlay for charters. So there are a number of scenarios, and ultimately it will be the purview of the board.
But my problem with that, I know you can make multiple options. My problem with that option is you're ignoring what happened last year. If you look back at just that year.
He's included.
I understand, but I'm just letting you know how I feel about that option.
I will run a number of scenarios, one of which is the one that you articulate, and then it will be up to the board to decide between those models.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Goodwin.
Well, I just want to say that it's not just capital, it's really the operating budget as well. And when we look at the operating budget and how it's been rolled back in the last 3 years, and this is certainly something that's impacted our charter schools and our other public schools, we've lost $100 million in Sarasota County and $4 billion statewide in our operating budget. Those are real dollars that you aren't able to spend. So you couple that with the capital issue, with going from PICO to sharing the 1.5 mil, which was an elevated rate last year for our charter schools, up to over $1,300 per student, whereas Lake County, I think, was getting, what, $50, $75 per student? And Miami-Dade and some of the larger counties were getting like $400, $500. And this year with PICO changing to the 145 mil for charter schools, you all are getting over $500 per student. For that, we're getting 20. So you see all the disparity. But what we need to do is, these are issues that I think the presentation of which, Dr. Bowden, I would like to include in our legislative platform, and certainly will be something that I would like to present as legislative chair for the state for Florida School Board Association, and I would like to have the support of our charter school partners when the legislature goes in session next March, because I think we all need to voice our opinions on these things, because whatever else we do, nothing is important as these things are. And I know that you have issues now with safety and security. I mean, on top of everything else, you've got the same issues that we have in terms of keeping your students safe and secure. So I think we'll make some good decisions on the 7th.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone coming today. I might have a question for you, Mitzi, if you don't mind. So close, so close. But, I think I echo a lot of the statements that were made up here today. I think, first and foremost, I think Sarasota County, regardless of what the state mandated or not, was ahead of the curve in seeing charter schools, wanting them to be successful, because we see them as our students. Sharing capital dollars is, outside of this county, prior to 2016, was unknown, unheard of. And it made me very proud, as someone who obviously is very supportive of school choice options, that we look at that as all of our students. And there is no question that, and I think the superintendent mentioned that, specifically to capital dollars, it's been a very volatile couple of years, and it makes planning harder. And so I see two sides of this. There are a lot of times when we go through the budget process, we have to predict, and that's not always easy to do. I feel like we have wizards in our budget office, and that is the challenge of public education and just the way it works. But there is planning and preparing for that, and having contingency dollars when things don't end up the way we wanted. Did anyone anticipate Parkland? And I wish we had never had to deal with that, but the implications that has on everyone, rightfully so. But in prioritizing your dollars towards a priority, towards a security plan, whereas that was something probably that many hadn't even considered. So I understand that. There may be a pinch for some this year, but I think I agree with what Mr. Robinson said, is to be able to look at the full overall analysis and really do almost a comparison to what the district, what we do from a budgeting standpoint, to compare it, because if you didn't plan for it or didn't expect it, then yeah, it's a scary scenario where you have to take a moment and figure out what to do. My only concern, where I wish I don't love that we don't have that analysis to guide you or make a decision as a board, because school's starting in a week and 2 weeks, and that makes it even harder in a volatile market to plan at all and prepare and staff. And so that, to me, is, I think, disappointing. I believe during the initial budget meeting we had in our workshop, and it was March 22nd, and so that is when there was some notification about what to expect in the coming year. And so I don't have the rate at which any financial meetings are occurring with charter schools or making them aware, but can you kind of tell us about, the notification, or letting them know that there would be a limited amount of funding or expectation from a forecasting standpoint?
I can't tell you exactly. I know that we sent out the statements for what their anticipated budgets would be for the following year. It was at a charter principals meeting.
Okay.
And those dollars were not included.
Okay.
Notification.
And I know a handful, I believe the entire board got some emails earlier in late spring, and then certainly much more recently, because I don't think there was clarity on what that comparison was. And so I guess I feel that by not having that analysis, I think Mr. Robinson brought it up 2 meetings ago.
And last meeting.
But putting that puts you guys in a tough position because as a board, and I don't want to speak for my other board members, but I think it's fair to say based on what was said up here, we want to continue to support and collaborate and partner together because they're all our students. But we're in a tight spot, and now we're past the point of timing. So I'm disappointed about that, and I don't think that's, I wish we could have had this conversation or had the analysis in advance to give you, even if it was unexpected, a little bit more planning time. However, I also want to speak that I think in Sarasota, one, we have the referendum, and we have a significant amount of money that other districts do not have, and so we have it. We are very fortunate to have the flexibility many other districts don't have, and we continue to share that with charter schools again, because I think we have this mission here that they're all our students, and I want to maintain that integrity moving forward. So I look forward to the 7th. I'm sorry and disappointed that the information wasn't provided to us so that we could at least give some direction earlier, because I understand that has implications on your operations and your planning. But I think based on what was said again, I think that we're going to do whatever we can together to work on what we have right now, and then future planning, working together as to, as Mrs. Brown said, talking to the legislature and not being at odds with each other. It's all about our students, and there's been some tremendous success that was articulated here, and that's really what it's all about. It's not about anything more than making sure those outcomes are high and successful. So with that, I will yield the floor, although Mrs. Zucker?
Yes. I realize when I start talking, I go right to the heart of the matter and right to the question I want to ask. And I forget about all the niceties of saying, thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking up for your school. I'm fine with charters. You all know that because I know you all. So this decision that's made will be based on what is right for everyone. For my decision will be based on what's right for everyone. That I can guarantee. I don't know what it's going to be, but it'll be the best that we can do for everyone. Thank you.
Mrs. Brown?
I usually pride myself on constituent service, something I learned when I was in the legislature that you try to answer. Of course, that was back before emails, and we didn't get so many. But at the same time, we had to type out letters back then. But we had word processors. We didn't have typewriters. We can go back further with carbon papers. This was one area that I put all of those emails to the side and haven't been able to respond to them because I don't have a response yet. Don't know where we're going. And, it's put us in a predicament also. I mean, the funding that we've had, not only the funding cuts that we've received, but also the problems with the police force and this extra things that we had to do for the hardening of our schools. So there's all these new things that happened, and we had to have that done. And and we know that, it was a time certain. So we've been busy this summer trying to get all that together, and hopefully, it's 1 week away. We can try to get some answers to you. But it's probably not all that you're going to want, because we got to cut it. We have to take it out of our budget too, and our budget was limited this year too. But again, thankfully, we've got the referendum dollars that help us over some of these hurdles. And again, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
So I just pulled up the agenda for August 7th. So when in the agenda? We're going to have a workshop ahead of time to be able to discuss this? How is this going to be during the course of the meeting? I'm looking at a very packed agenda August 7th with some really meaty subjects, and so I'm trying to understand at what point will that be on the agenda?
As I said, I am preparing an agenda item. It will appear under new business under the regular agenda. So it will be our regularly scheduled school board meeting on August 7th, but the item is not currently on your agenda.
Okay.
Thank you. I guess I think I will close that with, again, I don't want anyone to feel that we're turning our backs on any students, and there are a lot of unexpecteds that continue, and I guess my question and finality is, based on what was said last time, is the millage, the advertised rates were such that would allow flexibility as we determine the answer to this question, which I believe will be determined on August 7th. So that would assume looking forward, we'll have potentially budget amendments moving forward.
Correct. The final budget adoption actually occurs in September. So and a budget can be amended at any point.
Correct.
The advertisement has been done such that any changes won't be in jeopardy.
Correct. But again, and we don't, ironically, do that many budget amendments throughout the year at the board level. So I just want to make sure, to be fair to our district managed schools as well, that we're putting this out there and how that has implications on them too. So
correct.
Anyway, I appreciate all the work that you've done, though, because I know it's not easy. So unless there are any comments now before moving on to action items, we're on item number 5. Is there a motion?
Item number 5, adoption of the 2018-2019 tentative budget. I don't know that I need to read all these. Shall I just read the totals?
You do not need to read all of the various numbers
Just
presented here.
Just the totals? Would that be okay?
That would be fine.
I love that.
I think I'm funny.
You are funny. The beginning fund balance totals $161,250,813. The revenue, non-revenue sources and transfers in $718,337,175. Expenditures and transfers out $722,519,719. Ending fund balance $157,068,269.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any comments?
Well, excuse me. The motion would be that the tentative budget as presented be
adopted.
That's a key. Thank you. I have a second just for confirmation, since it was amended. There was a second.
Yes, I did.
There was a second.
Perfect. Are there any comments? Mrs. Brown.
I am going to vote for the budget, but knowing that we are getting into some dangerous territory also, because we've had to go into, we've had a very strong reserve balance. It was up over 10%. And I know we've had some pressure from across the street that, we shouldn't be keeping that fund balance that high. We should be paying our teachers. We did give teachers a raise, and we are taking that fund balance down to the pretty close to the 7.5% that our policy requires, but we're taking it down on a lot of those expenses are recurring expenses. I've talked to the superintendent about my concerns, and he assures me that he's still finding hidey holes where there's been money put away that we hadn't been counting up ahead, and that he will be able to make some changes so that we will not go below our 7.5% fund balance in our revenue. Is that an accurate statement?
I will agree that I will not be presenting to you at any time during my tenure a budget that takes you below the 7.5% fund reserve. I would argue that the term hidey hole is your term and not mine.
Oh. That's an accurate statement.
Was there anything else?
Well, sometimes I think he pulls it out of thin
Maybe
air,
I should stop now on that. Were there any other comments? Seeing none, I do want to add, I actually, I share outside of the Heidi Hole comment, I share the exact sentiments that Mrs. Brown just stated. I've said it before. I am very concerned at the direction we're going. Again, a lot of unknowns and unexpecteds occurred, so we have to be reasonable there. And Sarasota's we're very fortunate to have a policy that puts us in that financial position that we don't go below 7.5. Many other districts are not in that position and don't have that fiscally responsible practice. So that's the history of that, and that being that important is what I think has made Sarasota County a very sustainable district. But when you near that, it's concerning. And I think that I know how hard the CFO and the entire finance department work, and I don't want to have a multitude of budget meetings all the time, but I feel as though we, as a board, have to watch this very closely and be ready to pivot and know and have an idea of what that looks like very quickly and protect our classrooms at every step of the way, because unexpected circumstances happen, and who knows if 2018-19 is going to be any different. God, I mean, let's hope it's not to the tragic level, but from a financial standpoint, the unknowns, it's the reality of running an operation as large as this. So I'm concerned, and but I also believe that there are good items in here, but I think that as a board we need to take a very fine-tooth comb to the budget moving forward so that we don't have any major surprises. Mrs. Goodwin?
Well, I would just say that, we have to make sure that we don't micromanage, that we hired a superintendent to run the school district. And it is not our position to micromanage him or the financial department that we have. I trust that they will do what they have said that they will do. And so I have great confidence that that will take place.
Any other comments? Okay, board members, please vote on the motion before you. And the motion passes 4-1. That concludes the business items on the agenda today. Are there any additional comments? I know that I had asked about the update for the staffing for security purposes, because the start of school is right around the corner, and our next meeting is on August 7th, which doesn't give too much time between now and August 13th. And given the fact of the high level of interest of where we're at today with the community, I wanted to see if you were able to provide that.
Yes, I wanted to start with just an overall snapshot of hiring. We are 2 weeks from the start of school. Matter of fact, 2 weeks from yesterday. We have processed 127 new instructional hires. We have another 51 who are in process. Currently today, if you go on our district website, you'll see that we have 101 instructional vacancies. To put that into context, we had 88 2 weeks prior to the start of school last year. As you look at that, it breaks out that there are 6 district positions, 44 at the elementary, 19 at the middle, 18 at high school, 11 other, and we have 3 vocational or career and technical ed positions. As you look at that list, I've made contact with a number of principals today. As an example, on the middle school vacancy list, you see that Woodland Middle School has 8 vacancies. Certainly that would raise some level of alarm that we are 2 weeks before the start of school and they have 8 vacancies. In a conversation with their administration today, they have filled all of those vacancies, are in the process of having them processed through HR. And so when I say that we have 101 instructional vacancies, I don't want you to believe that we're going to have 101 classrooms with substitutes or uncovered on the first day of school. Another stat that we checked, we have 12 to 15 teachers that we've made commitments to, and we're waiting on DOE's response. Specific to our internal police department, we currently have 12 officers who have started with us. They will be on your personnel transaction report on August 7th. There is the possibility that that number will increase by 3 or 4 between now and Tuesday and allow us to transact them. Following the board meeting, we will be swearing those officers in. That's in addition to the chief. 2 of our 3 sergeants have been processed and will be part of that personnel transaction report. The 3rd may be complete with their background check. There's just a couple I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed. We have made offers and have acceptance to 23 out of the 24 officers. Our commitment to our law enforcement partners is that we would staff our city elementary schools first and then move to the county. We are in the process today, as a matter of fact, of reaching out to the cities and letting them know that we have sufficient numbers of officers that we will not need any assistance from the city of Sarasota or the city of Northport, that we'll be able to staff their schools on August 13th. And then we will begin to chip away at the number in unincorporated Sarasota County. At the farthest outlier, we believe that we will have our officers in all elementary schools by the end of the first 9 weeks. That's the long pole, that the absolute latest that we would be able to relieve those officers in unincorporated Sarasota County. Just as a point of context, we, through our efforts, had 148 applicants for our 24 school resource officer positions. Of the 23 officers that we have on board, 12 of them hold current FDLE certification. 11 are pursuing the EOT, which is equivalency of training. And I know that was a question that some of you had. I do not have breakdown on the states that they're coming from, but 12 are in state, 11 are out of state. In a conversation with the board chair, we are asking that we spend some time on Tuesday between the board workshop and executive session. There are some questions related to safety and security that we wish to use an exemption to the open meetings rules, just to talk about some issues and make sure that we're all on the same page. Because of their sensitivity related to safety and security, it necessitates that conversation takes place out of the sunshine.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments, questions? Mrs. Brown?
So if we don't have all of them, we'll have them all in place in the elementary schools, and you're thinking by 9 weeks we'll have them in all of the elementary schools throughout the county. But for that first 9 weeks, we might be going to the sheriff, asking him to fill them with the deputies, similar to what we did in April and May.
That is correct. And so that's a decision that he'll have to make, whether he's going to need to remove people from patrol or he does it as an off-duty assignment, which is what we did from spring break to the end of the year. But what came out of our interaction with law enforcement was kind of a unified request, is that we fill the cities first and that the sheriff was prepared to kind of be the last man standing in the elementary schools.
And you were saying that not all of them are FDLE approved yet. I mean, are we allowed to hire them and put them in place before they're, or maybe as guardians or something, or just like we can have teachers, we can hire them before they're fully certified and place them someplace?
Sure. So in a word, the answer is no, is that we will not be deploying any of these officers until they hold their Florida certifications. There is an opportunity that we could have gone the Guardian route with them, but that's 120 hours of training, so that's not something that you would do on the interim basis. And so as soon as they complete their EOT training, we are allowed to hire them and make sure they've gone through the required training so that when their EOT is complete, we can put them directly to work so that there's not a lag period of training. So a number of those officers are in training and have completed the EOT. We're just waiting for test scores to come back. But the answer to your question is we will not be placing any officer in any of our schools that doesn't hold FDLE certification.
While they're getting that EOT training, are they employees of ours? Are we paying them, or are they doing this on their own? Or what happens if they don't pass?
They are employees of ours that can be terminated during their probationary period if they do not complete EOT.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next policy review work session is August 7th at 4 o'clock, and the next monthly school board meeting is August 7th at 6:30. And as the superintendent mentioned, there will be an executive session pertaining to security in between those meetings. If there are no additional comments or questions, we are adjourned.